I want to know what you want to say to your many, 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 many fans. All those fans who were literally standing in prayer for you. What do you want to say to all of those fans?
I want to thank them for even caring. It was a wonderful feeling.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you will be singing and making records again?
Yeah, I'll be singing at 80.
At 80.
And making records.
On May 6th, 2004, Luther Vandross, the man who sold millions of records and was dubbed the Velvet Voice by his peers, critics, and his legions of adoring fans, sat for an interview with Oprah Winfrey to allay the health concerns of his most devoted fans and the music world at large. It had been a little over a year since Vandross suffered a massive stroke at his home in New York City, which left the legendary singer in a coma for nearly 2 months, severely impacted his speech abilities, and left him in a wheelchair for a period of time. Despite the obvious toll the stroke had taken on him, Vandross still radiated the trademark warmth and charisma that had endeared him to millions over the course of his illustrious career. Just a few months earlier, Vandross delivered a pre-taped acceptance speech at the Grammy Awards when his poignant ballad, Dance with My Father, won Song of the Year. Struggling to speak but filled with emotion, he thanked his fans, his mother, and the industry that had embraced him. It was a moment that encapsulated his indomitable spirit, but his vulnerability and halting speech pattern caused widespread concern about his well-being and prompted the appearance on The Oprah Winfrey Show.
You've come back from the dead. Every day do you say, I want to get a little better at something?
Well, right now, what I want to get better at may seem strange, but it's not. Mm-hmm. It's what I would like to get better at is living with this. Living with these thoughts, living with this, feeling of the last chapter of a book.
The poignancy of his words about living through, quote, the last chapter of a book, imprisoned by a set of limitations that robbed him of the incredible vocal gift he'd used to communicate for decades through music, continued to spark concern. But many believe Vandross could potentially overcome his diminished condition and rise again like a phoenix from the ashes. It wouldn't have been the first time he overcame incredible obstacles. Vandross's rise to stardom began in the 1970s as a backing vocalist for icons like David Bowie and Chaka Khan, toiling away behind the scenes until he finally got his big break in the spotlight. In the 1980s, he became a solo sensation with albums like Never Too Much and Gimme the Reason, showcasing his unparalleled ability to blend romantic longing with soaring melodies. His music redefined R&B and earned him 8 Grammy Awards over his career, solidifying him as, quote, the Pavarotti of pop. But Vandross's life was not without challenges. In the late 1980s, he survived a near-fatal car crash while driving in the Hollywood Hills, resulting in the death of his passenger and leaving him with several broken ribs, a broken hip, and numerous bruises and facial cuts. He eventually faced vehicular manslaughter charges but pled down to reckless driving and settled a civil suit with the family of the deceased victim. He also faced ongoing speculation about his sexual orientation, a topic he never fully addressed publicly, choosing instead to keep his private life separate from his public persona. When his weight fluctuations became tabloid fodder and started to negatively impact his health with diabetes and hypertension, Vandross did his best to stay above the fray and weather any storms of negative attention. Indeed, through all the controversies, Vandross continued to sing and continued to sell records, 40 million of them over the course of his career, and never let the pressures of fame or unflattering coverage in the media overshadow his artistry. And many assumed this would be the case this time around. Although there was a somber tone and perhaps even a tinge of resignation in his voice as he reflected on his condition with Oprah, most fans remained hopeful about Luther turning the corner. But it wasn't meant to be. On July 1st, 2005, Vandross passed away peacefully from complications related to his devastating stroke, robbing the world of one of the greatest voices in pop and R&B history. Luther Vandross was just 54 years old. I'm Derek Kaufman.
I'm Jason Beckerman.
And this is Last Days, Luther Vandross.
While he had made some progress in recovery in the months before his death, Vandross's health remained fragile ever since his stroke, and his death was not entirely unexpected. Nevertheless, it marked the end of a career that had spanned decades and was a significant loss to the music industry. He was not only a towering figure in R&B and pop, but also a source of inspiration and mentorship for countless artists, and his absence left a void that would be difficult to fill. The news of Vandross's death prompted an outpouring of grief and tributes from fellow musicians and celebrities. Fans and peers alike reflected on how Vandross's music had shaped their lives and careers, with tributes pouring in during live performances, interviews, and social media posts. Beyoncé, who had famously performed a duet of The Closer I Get to You with Vandross on his final studio album, expressed her deep sadness, calling him, quote, a true legend and one of the greatest voices of all time. Aretha Franklin, a close friend and collaborator, described him as a prince of a man and one of the sweetest and most gentle people. And even with a sore throat, Franklin honored a request to sing Amazing Grace at his funeral. Stevie Wonder also honored Vandross by performing So Amazing during his funeral, a heartfelt tribute to their long-standing friendship. The funeral was held on July 8, 2005 at Riverside Church in New York City, drawing hundreds of mourners, including industry legends and fans. In addition to Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder, singing legends Patti LaBelle and Dionne Warwick were also among the notable attendees who paid their respects during the ceremony that was filled with music, prayer, and reflections of his remarkable life. Vandross was also honored at the BET Awards, where Alicia Keys and Cissy Houston performed a powerful rendition of Dance with My Father in his memory. His influence was further recognized at the Grammy Awards, with a tribute celebrating Vandross and underscoring the profound impact he had on music and culture.
And his enduring legacy was perhaps best exemplified by his continuing success on the charts even after his passing. In 2006, his track Shine, an upbeat R&B song that samples Chic's disco song, reached at number 31 on the Billboard R&B chart. And in October 2007, a 4-disc box set titled Love Luther, featuring all of his hits as well as unreleased tracks and alternate versions from his recording sessions, hit the shelves, and eager fans scooped it up to glean the last bit of his genius from his vault. And 10 years after his passing, in 2015, Sony released yet another compilation album called The Essential Luther Vandross, which contained 3 more unreleased songs, including a live recording of Bridge Over Troubled Water with Paul Simon and Jennifer Holliday. Jason, if you watch this clip, it's just an incredible performance. I recommend checking it out on YouTube. Vandross is the anchor leg of this just soaring tour de force, performance, starting with Paul Simon with those sort of understated vocals. Then you get Jennifer Holliday as a bit more theatrical in the middle. But you end with Luther, and that's the ultimate sort of encapsulation of who he was in the music industry. He was a closer, man. That's the voice you couldn't follow.
So he bridges these two worlds, right? He's at once an incredible singer, obviously, one of the great voices of all time, but he was this incredibly relevant pop figure. You had somebody like Barry White. Everybody knows Barry White. His music is sort of essential in the American canon. But I don't think he was ever the great pop figure that Luther Vandross was. He never had the duets with the biggest stars, the Beyoncés of the world.
And he sounds like a 70s R&B artist.
Right.
He's wonderful.
Right.
I love Barry White in the same way, but you're right. He doesn't cross over and transcend across many generations.
Somehow Luther was able to do that. I think a big part of it, was his friendship with people like Oprah Winfrey, who kept him, back in the 80s and 90s, she was an enormous influencer and star maker, and she kept Luther very relevant. And he was able to the point you're making, singing alongside all of these great artists, and it's actually still continuing today, right? He's going to be on Kendrick's #1 hit. I guess it's already out, but the hit that's going to be #1 this week,
it's called Luther.
It's called Luther,
and
he's singing the hook, right?
Luther Vandross is singing the hook. It's a sample of one of his songs, and it was featured at the Super Bowl. There's no greater testament to someone's enduring relevance than that current artists, Kendrick and SZA, the two most relevant artists arguably right now after the Super Bowl and the whole Drake fiasco. And they're sampling Luther, and the song's called Luther.
I don't want to just
gonna be
fly
#1.
past this. It's not like they just went back and found somebody from the past who they wanted to include. they chose Luther for a very specific reason. He resonates with them. I mean, they're young people in themselves, but he also resonates with younger people. My kids know who Luther Vandross is, and I can't explain that. I don't know how many people. He's not, he's not
Aretha Franklin, but she sang at his funeral.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's a very, very big artist, and you're right. He epitomizes timelessness, right? You hear that voice, it never goes out of style. It seems like it could be pulled from any era. That's why it works right now in 2025. Luther Vandross was a transformative figure in R&B whose silky voice, heartfelt ballads, and impeccable artistry redefined the genre and left an indelible mark on pop culture. Rising to prominence in the 80s and 90s, Vandross blended the smooth, sexy sophistication of Marvin Gaye with the vocal precision of Sam Cooke, crafting timeless hits like Never Too Much and Dance With My Father that resonate across generations. Unlike Gaye, who shifted gears to branch into broader political issues and social justice causes with his music, Vandross never veered too far from his core competency as an artist, singing beautiful love songs tinged with nostalgia and heartache. His ability to infuse vulnerability and passion into his music made him a pioneer in romantic storytelling, but his influence extended far beyond R&B and actually shaped pop, soul, and even gospel music. As one of the most decorated and beloved vocalists of his time, Vandross's legacy continues to inspire artists and remind audiences of the power of music to connect and heal.
But the road to becoming an R&B icon was anything but a foregone conclusion. Music was always in his life from his childhood, when his sisters took him to the Apollo Theater and other venues in New York City to see Dionne Warwick and Aretha Franklin perform. Vandross toiled for years as a backing vocalist to bona fide superstars and established artists like Roberta Flack, Donny Hathaway, Evelyn Champagne King, Bette Midler, Chaka Khan, Diana Ross, Donna Summer, and Stevie Wonder. He even performed in ensembles, such as singing with a theater workshop group called Listen My Brother, which appeared in the pilot and several episodes of the first season of Sesame Street. Even in a group setting, it's clear that there was star potential in his vocals. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, Vandross wrote and sang commercial jingles for a bunch of companies, including NBC, Mountain Dew, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, and Juicy Fruit. His track, Everybody Rejoice, was a staple in Kodak commercials during the mid-1970s.
Get set. Get a Kodak instant camera from less than $54. At your photo dealers this Christmas.
He later became a lead singer in the group Change, which released a gold-certified album called The Glow of Love in 1980, featuring this memorable title track.
Flowers bloom in morning dew, and the beauty seems to say, it's a pleasure when you treasure all that's new and true and gay. Easy living, and we're giving what we know we're dreaming of. We are one, having fun, walking in the glow of love.
Vandross himself called it the most beautiful song I've ever sung in my life, and seemed to enjoy his time in the group, but he declined to perform on their second album after a contractual dispute with the band's creator.
And despite the success of the group, Vandross was absolutely destined for solo stardom, and it didn't take long for him to find it once he got his shot. After leaving Change, Vandross signed to Epic Records and released his debut solo album, Never Too Much, in 1981, and the title track immediately took off on the charts.
I just don't wanna stop. Oh, my love. A million days in your arms is never too much. I just don't wanna stop. Too much, never too much, never too much, never too much.
The song reached number 1 on the R&B charts and remains a classic of the genre. When you combined his off-the-charts vocal talent with the tremendous work ethic he brought to every project, it's no mystery how Luther Vandross suddenly catapulted into a cultural icon. He released a series of solo albums in the 80s, but never stopped doing session work with other top musicians and providing guest and backing vocals. Vandross produced Aretha Franklin's gold-certified, award-winning comeback album Jump To It in 1983, which enjoyed a 7-week run at number 1 on the Billboard R&B album chart and brought Franklin her first top 40 pop hit since 1976. He also sang the ad-libs and background vocals on Stevie Wonder's 1985 hit Part-Time Lover, worked on the background chorus for a David Bowie song in the movie Labyrinth, and even voiced a Saturday morning cartoon character on ABC's Zack of All Trades. Luther Vandross just blanketed the entertainment landscape in the 80s and 90s, culminating with his biggest pop hit of all, Here and Now in 1989.
Here and now, I promise to love faithfully. You're all I need. Here and now, I vow to be one with thee.
This song was Vandross's first single to appear on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 6 on the chart. And the 90s were even more fruitful for him, earning 2 more top 10 hits with Power of Love in 1991 and his cover of Lionel Richie, Diana Ross's duet, Endless Love in 1994, which he performed with fellow vocal powerhouse Mariah Carey and became his highest charting song, reaching all the way up to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100.
My love, there's only you in my life, the only thing that's right. Ooh.
My first love,
Yeah.
your every breath that I take, your every step I make.
You know, Jason, messing with a classic like Endless Love, Lionel Richie and Diana Ross slay that song. They both have incredible voices. It's already sort of this like
One of the
schmaltzy
legendary classic romantic songs of all time.
And it doesn't seem like you can improve upon it, right? It's sort of impeccable in its own way. They both are just killing that song. So it's always a risky gambit, but it kind of paid off here. You know, the version with Mariah Carey and Luther Vandross, their vocals are beyond reproach.
Yeah.
Sort of like Lionel Richie and Diana Ross, but there's a little bit more sort of character in their voices. When you're listening to Mariah Carey and Luther Vandross, they're just perfection. It's almost beyond sort of anything you can appreciate other than just you're listening to two people who have a flawless
You sort of have the two greatest vocalists of their era, right? Aretha Franklin by this point is not singing the way that she used to. And so you get these two people who are well regarded as having two of the
greatest voices
of all time, and certainly of the 1980s, late 80s into the 90s. And so it's sort of unfair to Lionel Richie and Diana Ross. I mean, I'm sure they both made a lot of money off of their
and the Lionel Richie version is more famous.
Yes.
There's no doubt that is the standard.
And if you're sort of old school about it, you're going to say, "Oh, I always loved the old one." But this one comes along, and those two, I mean, it's absurd what they can do with their vocals.
It really is.
Although Vandross was a towering superstar, his peak fame occurred during a period in this country when sexual orientation was a far bigger issue than in the current landscape. And we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention how this impacted his career. Derek, I remember this very well. There were always these rumors circulating around Luther Vandross that he was gay. And it's something that in the sort of the time didn't really work to his favor. And he really did his best to kind of push down against it. In December of 1985, he filed a libel suit against a British magazine that attributed his 85-pound weight loss to AIDS, while he insisted the weight loss was from a strict diet. Now, putting aside whether he was gay or not, an accusation that somebody had AIDS at any point, but especially back then, this is before sort of maybe Magic Johnson changed things up in the early 90s a little bit, changed the conversation. At that point, if you had AIDS, there were a lot of people out there that said you got what you deserved.
Yes.
And, so that kind of accusation really threatened his entire career.
And the fact that there was an article out there that said, look at how, I remember this, it was a very ugly time in journalism because Luther Vandross was a guy who was unmarried. He didn't have any children. These rumors constantly swirled around him because he was singing love ballads and people thought of him as a romantic lead.
He had a bit of a sort of a stereotypical feminism to him that I think people picked up on, but he was just a balladeer and he sang in a specific way. And at the time, when you fit certain of those stereotypes, people just picked up on it. And then the 85-pound weight loss and then the magazine articles, it really did him as a service.
That's right. I mean, his weight was always a topic of discussion because he would balloon sometimes, and he did. He he lost a lot of weight for a period of time, but the way the media covered it to try to wedge in the weight loss issues with his sexuality, I thought was gross even at the time. And I was a kid when this was going on. I was like, this feels icky.
It's obviously the height of Reagan's America, and Christian conservative values made coming out a very scary proposition for artists and entertainers who were worried about incurring the wrath of someone like Reverend Jerry Falwell, who would purposely target gay or rumored to be gay musicians, actors, and sort of, they would blackball them at the best.
Try to destroy their career. This was the moral majority time in America.
Call for boycotts of the movies, to call for boycotts of the record labels or the studios behind their movies. It was really terrible what was happening.
Yeah.
In 2006, just a year after Luther Vandross's death, Bruce Valanche, a comedy writer and friend of Vandross, told Out magazine that Vandross told him, "No one knows I'm in the life," and said that Vandross had very few sexual contacts aside from a relationship with a man in Los Angeles during the late 80s and early 90s. In 2017, Patti LaBelle also claimed that Vandross was gay, but concerned that coming out would be detrimental to his career, saying Vandross had a lot of lady fans and just didn't want to upset the world.
And just 2 years before his death, Vandross recorded what would become his final studio album, Dance with My Father. Already a living legend at this point, the album debuted atop the Billboard 200 chart, selling nearly 500,000 units in its first week of sales. It was also critically acclaimed, earning Vandross 2 American Music Awards and 4 Grammy Awards, including Song of the Year and Best Male R&B Vocal Performance. Now in his early 50s, it was crystal clear Vandross wasn't done and may have even been entering a new phase as a master of his craft. And nowhere was this more true than on the eponymous track, which Billboard magazine critic Gail Mitchell wrote was, quote, "Signature Luther, hot buttered vocals dripping over lush ballads with occasional mid-tempo spikes, proving again that he's a gifted vocalist who transcends time." And it's true. Luther Vandross may be gone, but his voice is timeless. And so I thought it only fitting to give Luther himself the final word.
If I could get another chance, another walk, another dance with him, I'd play a song that would never, ever end. How I'd love, love, love to dance with my father again.